all bad facts. But then you got the zombie issue. How does that play at a trial? Zombies? And what's going on up here? Let's bring in our think tank tonight. Maybe they can figure it all out for us tonight. We've got a good one. All criminal defense attorneys. Ecleynne Mercy is back with us. Great to see you, Ecleynne. Josh Schiffer, great criminal defense attorney and former senior prosecutor before he went to the dark side. Brian Wagner joins us from New York, tonight. Great to have everybody aboard. Josh, let me start with you because this looks like it's right up your alley. How do zombies play inside the courtroom for the defense? Is there any way for them to try to use her belief that her children were zombies to her advantage in front of a jury?
It's so fanciful. Juries are going to be entertained and engaged by it, but the defense has a really hard row to hoe, so to speak, on this one. It's not like there's a current diagnosis of a recognized psychological illness or mental illness. She doesn't have a lifelong schizophrenia or something very, very severe. So they're going to have to rely an enormous amount on the testimony of these forensic psychiatrists in coming up with a defense. And I hope they focus on zombie. I think it'll be new. I think it'll be different. It certainly fits with our current culture of in Hollywood.
You know what's interesting? And you know, I appreciate what criminal defense attorneys, what your job is and what you have to do. But that phrase, come up with the defense, like prosecutors never have to come up with anything. They just got to put the facts out there. But it's the defense, Ecleynne, who has to come up with something. So what are they going to come up with these zombies?
Well, I mean, we live in a post-Tiger King era, so I think people are, and we like everybody in the world is everybody in the United States at least is kind of in a bubble. So it's like, I think that people all over are like in touch with their sanity or their, at least the line of insanity. So, I mean, if you do it well, I think you can persuade certain people. I just have a problem with the whole state not having a mental insanity defense. I have a problem with that. I feel like constitutionally it doesn't really sit right with me. But yeah, that's just it. I don't get it. I don't get how you just go away with the defense, the mental defense, because so many people use it. Like a lot of people use I'm innocent, and guess what? The system has not shut down completely. So I don't understand Idaho. My bad.
Brian Wagner, do you think that maybe Lori Vallow Daybell will argue in front of this jury that she was brainwashed by Chad Daybell and his beliefs and all this zombie stuff, and then Chad and her brother basically had some sort of control over her that she just couldn't break out of?
Thanks for having me, Vinny. I really hope not. If I'm her defense attorney, I really do not want her getting up there and testifying, because then you just open up a whole bag of worms. But more importantly, if I'm her, what I'm talking about, or as the defense, what I'm talking about is that she didn't have the mental intent to actually commit these crimes. You don't need to actually go into the details. Just let the confusion sit with the jury and hope the prosecutor doesn't meet their burden of proof.
You know, Josh, from the beginning, I mean, the reaction to this woman, and I think it's the same reaction a jury's going to have, is they're going to be scratching their heads and trying to figure out why and how could she possibly do this? I mean, little JJ's a special needs child. This little guy needed even extra attention. And then her daughter, who was her protector. I mean, her daughter stood by her side when police would talk to her. She would speak to them and sort of help her mom out, almost realizing that her mom had some issues that she was dealing with. But to me, it's a mother and her children. And to me, the reaction is always the same. How can you do this? How could you do this? What is the explanation?
The American justice system specifically allows you to be completely mentally ill and culpable. We can find you guilty even with a mental illness. I think it's shameful that Idaho doesn't have a really nice mental illness, not guilty by reason of insanity defense. But at the same time, you are allowed in the American judicial system to get convicted all day with a host of mental illnesses. And what I think is going to happen is the state is going to double down if the defense goes the mental health route and show that, sure, she was swept up in love. She fantasized about all these end of world doomsday scenarios. But at the end of the day, she killed her kids, or at least was involved with the death of her kids. And then we're going to get over to whether she's going to flip or not. If she's competent enough now to stand trial, is she competent enough to provide evidence against her co-defendants? Plus, we still don't know what charges are even going to come out. There's a lot more coming up on this story.
There's a lot more. Brian, do you see the mental state of Lori Vallow Daybell being any different than Chad? Because they both have this doomsday belief. Originally, the story was July 22nd, which is come and gone, and we're all still here, right? I'm still in my basement. Then there's talk that maybe it's August of 2020. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see in September, right? But do you think there's a different mental state for these two, the husband and the wife, the guru and the follower?
I don't, because ultimately, Lori Vallow Daybell is not going to be able to argue duress. And that's really what you're talking about, is that I did this because I was forced by at this point, my second husband. I don't see how that defense could possibly come in.
Wait. Got to correct you, Brian. I got to add 3. It's husband number 5. Number 5. Go ahead, continue.
But yeah, I mean, there's no way she's going to be able to argue that I am being forced to do this by my husband number 5. If that was the case, you'd expect mountains of other evidence where she's calling 911, where she's being forced into this cult of mind, and you just don't have that. So that's a really uphill battle for her to try to go.
All right, when we come back, Ecleynne Mercy will be fired up on all cylinders. Tu Tao, one of the 4 officers from Minneapolis, sitting down for an interview. We'll take a look at a little bit of his body cam video. What should the charges be against him? Does he have a defense? Is he as culpable as Officer Derek Chauvin? All of that when we return.
I cannot breathe. I cannot breathe. Oh. What's that? You know how long I fought with him? He's being held down. They'll kill me. I can't breathe. This is why you don't do drugs, kids. I can't breathe.
He is human, bro.
He's talking, so he's fine. Okay. We tried that for 10 minutes.
That's some bum ass. Y'all know that. You don't gotta sit there with your knee on your neck, bro.
He's talking, he's fine.
Bro, he ain't.
Okay. All right, we're done.
You circle.
Okay, we're
like
done.
in a jiu-jitsu move,
We're done.
bro. You try
We're done.
to his breathing right there, bro.
Okay.
Like, you don't think that what it is, bro? You don't think nobody understands that right there, bro? I trained at the academy, bro. That's some bro.
You did. Okay.
Right,
Then you understand.
bro.
All right.
That's bro.
Please.
Stopping his breathing right there, bro.
I can't breathe. Okay, he's talking. It's hard to talk when you.
Bro, but you
it's hard to
can get him
talk
off
if
the
you're
ground.
if
In a
you're
bump
not
right now.
breathing.
You can get him off.
That's the newly released body cam footage from Tu Tao, who is one of the 4 officers. He's the one who's not on George Floyd as George Floyd is dying on the ground in the streets of Minneapolis. He's the one facing the crowd, and through his body cam we got to hear and see the reaction of the crowd, who was pleading with Tao and with the officers to do something, but as we know, they did nothing. Tu Tao was also interviewed afterwards. We've got that video as well. Take a listen.
Do you think there was anything you could have done differently to intervene?
I'm in the belief that there's always something different that you can always do in every single call.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to second guess, right? It's easy to look in hindsight. Have you thought about things like that and what maybe could have been done differently?
Yeah, I mean,
Like what?
Well, I guess if we're being human, differently, I guess. It would be more observant towards the Floyd.
All right, that's Officer Tutal. You think maybe a little more observant, a little more, hands-on on what's happening and observing and maybe reacting, because he's a little more senior than the two rookies that were there with Chauvin. Maybe if he said something would have changed. Anyhow, I want to bring back in our think tank, and I know Ecleynne Mercy fired up on this one because she's on the podcast this week, the Court TV podcast. Make sure you download it. Ecleynne, explain to me why you believe that Tutal is as responsible as the other three officers who were physically on George Floyd. Tutal not on top of George Floyd, doing crowd control at that moment.
Because I practice criminal defense. And if this was not an officer, he would have been charged. He would have been an accessory. The prosecution would have gone through the litany of questions. Well, you saw there was a EMT worker there who stated that he was about to die. Why didn't you listen? Oh, there was another person who said he was about to die. Why didn't you listen? Why? If he was a private citizen, there would be a higher expectation to help than if he's an officer. He became a defendant, but he became the most protected defendant because he wore a uniform. I don't care. You had many people, not just one, not just two, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 people there telling you to stop. If this was any other defendant, if it was any other person, that's it. Throw the book at him, he's done. I would have told him to plead a long time ago, but because he is a police officer, suddenly we have to, no, wrong is wrong. Be consistent. I just want them to make it make sense. It doesn't make any sense.
The charge is murder, Josh Schiffer. He's charged with aiding and abetting that murder. Do you see former Officer Tutal any differently than the other officers who were physically restraining George Floyd?
Absolutely. And I think that he walks with the charges that he's getting. It's an absolutely horrific death. Clearly, the training that was exercised by these officers was wrong and deadly. However, this officer had multiple competing duties at the time while making these decisions. He chose, in retrospect, wrongly. He didn't save the life of someone. Instead, he's going to stand behind the fact that he was protecting the other officers. He was protecting the integrity of the scene. He was fulfilling his duty to keep people away during this arrest. And it's awful that George Floyd died. But I'm sorry, this officer is not going to be found criminally responsible for anything having to do with the murder. It's just not going to happen. I don't think the defense could lose that case.
Brian, you agree?
No, I mean, I can't disagree with Joshua more. I think what we ask jurors to do is act reasonable and think of if you were a reasonable person in that same situation. What we tell our children to do. You jump in there and you say, get off of him. We've gained compliance. He's no longer a threat if he was ever a threat. So the notion that this officer is dealing with the 8 people that are yards away as a defense, I think a talented prosecutor will smack that out of the park in a heartbeat.
With all due respect, you're never going to get 12 people in the box to agree on a conviction when you've got an officer who is definitely protecting that scene, protecting the integrity.
There was an EMT worker there who said, hey, get off his neck. I work for EMT. I save people. He had the opportunity to do that, didn't. He also had his radio in which he could have called 911. He could have called ambulance to come. Matter of fact, he had a quicker way to do it. He had all of that.
I'm not saying that he couldn't have made better decisions, but to then equate that with murder because he showed up on a scene, as you can see from his body cam, he's keeping a large crowd of people away at a location where he previously noted was hostile to officers. Now, listen, I practice civil rights law. I've sued officers, but I can tell you a jury's not going to convict an officer for failing to save someone It's not going to happen with anybody that served in the military and tried to protect a fellow soldier.
So
It wasn't,
Vinny,
they were, oh, God.
sorry, if I may, Joshua hits on an important point that I'm sure Ecleynne was about to talk about, is when we do jury selection, we want to make sure that we get jurors that aren't necessarily going to vote in our favor, but at least are considering it. And so jury selection, you want to get rid of, as a prosecutor, every single one of those people that Joshua is talking about. They're not going to be able to be fair and biased. But you want to make sure that you don't overpromise either. Look, ladies and gentlemen, if you see someone drowning and someone is actually holding his head underneath the water, what are you going to do? And that's the analogy you talk about with jurors, to make sure that they're open-minded to what the potential outcome could be.
Like, if George Floyd was, let's just talk about it. If he was a private citizen and he was about to have a baby, and you had an EMS worker saying, "Hey, I can deliver a baby," cool, clear, let's do it. He has been asking for breath. There was minute 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in which Cal could have said something. After minute 4, I can't help him anymore. He's had ample opportunities to save him. There was nobody obstructing him. Nobody was considered a threat. You literally saw the body cam. They're all concerned and scared. So the problem is, it scares me, because if an officer can't read a room, that's a problem. Why is he an officer?
I don't think that reading a room is part of post officer training right now, bluntly. And unfortunately, there's not an affirmative requirement to save a life, especially when you're fulfilling your lawful duty as a peace officer to protect a scene, to protect a fellow officer during a known and articulable.
It's to protect and serve people first. Property last. It's to protect and serve the people. George Floyd is the people. He was the people. He was the person that we protected and serving. Just because they're defendants, again, he is still innocent until proven otherwise. That was the innocent man that died there. He was not convicted. At that point, they should have treated him like that. He kept breathing. If I can't breathe, so what? Because
Josh, I'll give you a final rebuttal.
Go rail against Officer Chauvin, who I think's guilty as sin, but poor Officer Cow, no, convicting him of murder makes as much sense as mint-flavored avocado. It just doesn't taste right.
But it's people like Officer Tao that allow officers like Derek Chauvin to exist and thrive. That's the problem.
No, that's the overarching police culture, and we both know that.
All right, got to take a quick break. When we come back, much more. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm crime and justice reporter Julia Janae. This is your legal news break. We begin with a break in the case of hip-hop pioneer and a Run DMC DJ. After 18 years, 2 men have been indicted in the 2002 unsolved murder case of the man known as Jam Master Jay. Federal prosecutors in New York say Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington have been charged with the DJ's shooting death. The 1980s hip-hop group member, whose real name was Jason Mizell, was shot once in the head and killed at a recording studio in New York City's Queensboro. This happened back on October 30th in 2002. There were several other witnesses to the killing in the studio at that time. Detectives today said this is a case they've tried to bring charges on for years, and they never gave up. The then 37-year-old left behind a wife and 3 children. And officials in Florida say a man allegedly stalked a WWE wrestler for years before traveling to her home on Sunday in Tampa, Florida, with plans to hold her hostage. Investigators say Philip Thomas left his car at a church around midnight and then walked into the wrestler Sonia DeVille's neighborhood. Deputies say he arrived at DeVille's home, cut a hole in the patio screen, and watched the homeowner for hours. Investigators say he then slipped inside when DeVille went to sleep, setting off the alarm. Responding deputies found him inside carrying a knife, zip ties, and duct tape and mace. DeVille took to Twitter herself to thank everyone for their concern, giving special thanks to the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office. And in New York City, a suspect wearing a Guy Fawkes mask wasn't able to outsmart the NYPD. Sam Resto was arrested and is in federal custody on accusations he torched a brand new police department van. According to the criminal complaint, surveillance video at a gas station show him holding a red can back on July 29th. Prosecutors say he smashed a window, poured gasoline into the interior of the van before setting it on fire and fleeing. The NYPD tracked him down and recovered a backpack in a park that they believe Resto used to aid in his vendetta, including items Resto was seen wearing that day. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison. That's it for your Court TV News Break. Vinny, back to you.
Julie Janae, thank you so much. All right, folks, next story we're going to take a look at. And on the docket tonight, sorry, folks. Forgot about that new intro we have for On the Docket. Anyhow, on the docket tonight, we got a story really tragic on many, many different levels involving a woman named Savannah Spurlock. She was a mother of 4, goes missing, and then her remains are found 6 months later. But now it's a murder trial that we're tracking here on Court TV. Julie Grant has more.
I want to know why did you do this to her? I mean, I can't imagine anybody doing that, just killing somebody. I mean, you know, you can't even know her.
Those are questions for Savannah Spurlock's alleged killer. Spurlock and a friend went out to a bar on the night of January 3rd, 2019. The friend made it home. Spurlock, a mother of 4, did not. Around 2:30 a.m., Spurlock was seen on surveillance video leaving the bar with 3 men, including a man named David Sparks. Not long after, Spurlock had a conversation with her mother. At the time, her mom thought she was intoxicated, but not in distress. Spurlock was never seen or heard from again.
Somebody knows something. Somebody, they'll mess up sooner or later. We'll find out what happened to her. I know it. I know we will.
7 months after Spurlock disappeared, a break in the case. David Sparks' father noticed a foul odor on their property. That odor led police to make this grim discovery.
As a result of the autopsy, we can now confirm that the remains are those of Savannah Spurlock.
It was devastating news to the family.
There are days where it's very, very difficult to not break down, and I have had times throughout these days that I do, because I miss her. I know now that I will never see her on this earth.
Sparks maintains his innocence and is being held without bond, pending his trial on murder charges.
There's going to be so many people that have expressed their interest to go to these court proceedings. You know, people that didn't really even know her, that are just supporting us, want justice served.
And will justice be served in this case? And it's a case that not the easiest necessarily for prosecutors. They do have some good facts. Let's bring back in our think tank tonight. And in this case, one of the facts that I looked at in this one was that surveillance video, and you've got Savannah Spurlock being seen on this surveillance video with 3 different individuals. Only one has been charged, and I know exactly where the defense is going to go at trial, right? Going to point the finger over there and just try to point it away from the defendant, David Sparks. Brian, you've probably seen that a million times as a prosecutor.
Yeah, and the real challenge for the prosecutor is, what is his motive? You don't have to prove motive, but juries like to know it. And also, other than the fact that the body is recovered at his property and that there's video surveillance showing them together, there's no other indication that he's actually the one that committed the murder. So they have a really hard case as a prosecutor for this. The sympathy factor is obviously through the roof, and you want to make sure that Savannah Spurlock gets her justice. But connecting Sparks to it is very difficult.
Well, Ecleynne Mercy, I believe in common sense. I believe in, 1 + 1 sometimes does equal 2, right? Last person seen with him, found on his property, the father calls it in. I mean, the bottom line here is, I think you've got a nice circumstantial case that makes some sense. filling in the X, Y, and Z in between sometimes gets a little difficult because you know what? We don't have a confession, we don't have a videotape, but we do have some evidence here.
Yeah, and it can go either way at trial because, again, if the little evidence, if it can't overcome the other two men, it's going to be really, really hard. So, I mean, I guess the prosecution has a job on their hands because you have two other suspects. And why did you negate them? I don't think they gave us a reason why. And why are you singling out this particular defendant? So, I mean, that's a whole lot of room for a defense attorney to play with. So I'm curious to see how they're going to move forward. I really do. I think that the prosecution needs a little bit more than what just has been presented.
Josh, if I'm the prosecutor, I might even call those other two men to the stand. Rather than make them just these people we never see or hear from, put them on the stand. If I'm the prosecutor, I am seeking the truth, I am seeking justice. So I'll put them on the stand, find out what happened that night, where they went, and then corroborate their stories and eliminate them. And then the defense is stuck, right?
And that's why you're not a prosecutor, because that'd be crazy pants. Are you kidding me? You're not going to put two wild cards up there. They could absolutely destroy the prosecution's case against this single standalone individual who has two empty chairs to point at. Yeah, there's the DNA from the inside of the closet that matches her. So it's going to be proven that she was bleeding there. But come on now. This is not a murder case. This is there was a dead body you know something about, but we don't have enough evidence to prove you killed her. It's a shame. I don't know how the prosecution lost control of this case from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not and Brian, I'm with you. It's not an easy one. It's a difficult one. But you're going to have to argue circumstantial evidence, which, a lot of times is better than direct evidence, right? I mean, how many times have we seen eyewitnesses get things wrong? You put three people in a room, you show them something, you might get three slightly different or completely different versions of it, and that's the direct evidence. Sometimes the circumstantial evidence can be more persuasive.
As a prosecutor, I love circumstantial evidence. And what we tell a jury is, look, the law doesn't prefer any type of evidence. DNA is not better evidence than video. Video is not better than direct evidence. The law doesn't prefer a type of evidence, but circumstantial evidence is only as good as the facts that support it. Here, there's a huge gaping hole of how'd she die?
Yeah.
Who actually did it? And so all these surrounding circumstances show you that she died on property, probably, but that's it. It doesn't connect him as the murderer.
And I have a problem.
Why do we lose the good ones? Why do we lose the good ones like Brian that go to the dark side with you guys? I don't understand why this happened. Like for me, at least when I left being a prosecutor, I did civil law. I didn't go all the way over. But anyhow, all right, Think Tank will stay with us. When we come back, we're going to talk about, I was just called Crazy Pants, but how about Lori Vallow Daybell? What's going on up here? Your reaction next.
Her religious stuff has gone way off the deep end. She thinks she's married to Moroni in the past.
You think she's what?
We're married to Moroni at the top of the temple.
Angel LDS.
She knows when the second coming is happening next year. She threatened me physically. She made threats about the kids. She doesn't care what happens to them. Come get them. I don't care. We won't hear that much longer anyway. And I've got my God powers. I can kill you if I want, anytime I want. It's just irrational stuff.
Yeah.
She needs some serious help. I want her to get help. I'm worried about her. They're scared the crap out of her.
That's Charles Vallow, and he knew Lori Vallow better than anyone. I mean, was married to her longer than the other four husbands and was still in love with her, loved her, wanted her to get help. He realized something was wrong with her. So, posted all this today on social media and asked you your thoughts about Lori Vallow's mental health, mental state, in light of what has happened and what has transpired and what we've learned, and the fact that, guess what, there's no insanity defense in Idaho. And we begin with our 13th juror comment of the day from Kayla, who writes, I think Lori may have already been a little nuts before she met Chad. She may have already had some of these extreme beliefs, and Chad Daybell just validated them. Brian Wagner, let me ask you this, though. The one thing that we've learned from little JJ's grandparents was that they believed Lori was a great mom, and they trusted their grandson with her and believed in her and loved her. And then something changed. Something just changed. I mean, do you think there was a breakdown and she met Chad, or do you think meeting Chad caused whatever happened here?
So generally, she's already down that road, and maybe Chad forced her down the road a little bit quicker than she would have been there already. But it's hard to really believe that, but for Chad, she'd be this perfect mother. So for me, that's probably not the case. It's probably that she was already predisposed to that sort of break.
A pre-existing condition. Sandy tonight writes, I believe she was so in love with Chad that she believed and did whatever he wanted her to. Sadly, her children were not her priority and had to pay with their lives for it. Ecleynne, do you think ultimately this was all about love?
No, it was crazy. She was crazy to begin with. And it just, it was just it was just crazy on diarrhea. It just kept compounding. And I think the relationship just made it worse because you have somebody to validate you're crazy. It's just insane. However, I do believe that she, because you're taking trips and things of that nature, had she had the actions of, the world was actually coming to an end, had she started, building a bunker or like an ark in the middle of the dry desert, then I could understand if the crazy really took her away. But she's in Hawaii. She's drinking Mai Tais. I do not believe that she was that far gone to just forget or just not relate to her children being murdered. I don't get that. I think she was crazy, but not that crazy.
Life tonight writes, Lori Shallow, I think she wrote Shallow, yeah, Shallow, nice, was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs long before Chad. While I think he played the greatest part in influencing Lori to kill the children, she needed an intervention a long time ago. Ask any surviving husband. Josh Schiffer, is 5 marriages evidence of anything here?
Some people would say that doing the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and over and expecting a different result. Clearly, she could be considered insane. So could most people getting married again. But here's my real problem with what your viewers were saying. They were equating love and religion with mental illness. I love me some Beyonce, and Crazy in Love is fantastic. But Crazy in Love does not let you kill your babies. It just doesn't. It's not going to work. This is a great case for the state. What I think is going to happen, she's going to be up against the ropes. She's going to be fighting back. The prosecution's going to be bearing down. And she's probably going to come out and tell everybody about what really happened. I don't think she's stronger than the meanest gangsters.
I'm ready for the book deal. I think there's a book deal in the works, personally. That's just what I think. Watch out for a book deal.
Well, Chad was a book publisher. He can't publish it now. Chad can't publish it. He's kind of locked up right now, so
yeah,
I'll have to find a new publisher.
Yeah.
Lori tonight writing, that woman is not crazy. She's plain evil. If she was crazy, she wouldn't have been able to hide all the bodies up until now and get away with it for so long. She is that old saying, crazy like a fox. Let me read one more. This one from Angel I want to read. Angel, she is cold and calculated black widow, and meeting Chad with his beliefs just fed her into wanting yet another new life as the chosen leader gods. I only have about 15, 20 seconds here, Brian. Cold. That's the one thing I've noticed about her. Her reaction to people dying and things happening, ice cold. What does that tell you?
It tells me that she is exactly that. She has no remorse and she's ice cold.
Yeah. That narcissism.
I agree. I think that's the way she plays. I mean, even when she was in that courtroom, putting on the makeup and everything, the looks that she had. Anyhow, got a lot more to talk about, but we're out of time for tonight. Great job, Ecleynne Mercy, Josh Schiffer, Brian Wagner. Please come back on the show.
Vinny.
Love having you on. All right, folks, that'll do it for us tonight. Remember, 3 hours every night, deep dive into the world of crime and justice. No one else on television is doing what we're doing. Only your front row seat to justice, Court TV. That's it, folks. I'm Vinny Politan. As always, have a great night. And don't forget to hug the kids.